Sending positive vibes to all truth seekers. Welcome to the Library of Humanity Vodcast. In this episode, we're looking at society does not, I repeat, does not make you happy. So to look at this sentence, society does not make you happy, we need to start with what is happiness and how do you get it? Okay, so today is a great day to talk about happiness because it's Friday afternoon. A lot of people are pretty tired after the work week or your week at school. And so the idea of happiness is kind of on the top of people's minds on a Friday afternoon. But it's kind of a misconception about what happiness is, because being in a Friday afternoon has nothing to do with happiness, really. I mean, it does, but the idea is, how can we be happy all of the time, right? If you're not happy all of the time, then that's kind of like a mini version of happiness or a downgraded version. So what we want is to upgrade our level of happiness. So how does that happen? How do we do that? The idea is that happiness is living beyond yourself, living as something greater than you, going beyond the concept of yourself. And yourself is another word for that is ego. How do you go beyond your ego? And that is, once you're able to do that, that is happiness. Okay, in another episode, I will talk about how to go beyond your ego. But for the matters of this episode, we're just looking at going beyond the ego for the purposes of happiness. And one other way is to develop yourself. So getting a little bit into how to achieve happiness. We're not going to get in great detail, but it's to develop yourself. And how do you do that? One of the best ways is you have to stay healthy. So you have to eat right, you have to exercise, you have to have good relationships, you have to be a semi-sociable person, a little bit sociable. You have to care about the environment because the environment, nature makes you happier. So you have to love hiking, biking, you have to love being out in nature. And so when you have a healthy body, now you're ready to develop yourself mentally. So to develop your body, to develop your mind and your psychology. Okay, so I have a video on this channel, and it's about developing your body to develop your mind in order to develop your heart. So that is kind of a foundational episode for this one. So the development levels is we're improving and we're going up the development stages, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And also in my previous episode, spiral dynamics. So we can use those maps to learn how to go up these development stages in order to achieve more happiness. And that is the ultimate goal of these developmental maps for psychological development, is ultimately happiness. But we have to redefine and rethink what happiness is. Again, happiness is not going to be the opposite of suffering. Okay, so what we're looking for in happiness is incorporating suffering in it. But the idea is, how can we decrease the suffering? Okay, so because the suffering is a great distraction to happiness, ultimate happiness. Okay, so again, suffering, its opposite is happiness with a small h. Okay, so the small h happiness is what you're feeling right now on a Friday afternoon. Very, very important. You're feeling this small h happiness. If you're a college student, maybe you're looking forward to partying tonight and socializing. If you're a 9-to-5 type worker, maybe you're looking to relax with a nice dinner and a couple of beers or a glass of wine, and then going to bed early, getting enough sleep. And that's relevant for me today. For me, I'm going only on like 4 hours of sleep from last night. And that's going to be related to this episode because I had to wake up early for reasons of society. I had to wake up early for being kind of a productive member of society. So we'll talk about what that means to be a productive member of society and whether or not that leads to your happiness. excuse me. So going up these development levels, you ultimately, so this is the paradox of self-development. This is the ultimate paradox, is you're going up these development levels to develop yourself. But ultimately, the final step is detaching from yourself. So you're developing yourself more and more and more. You're becoming healthier, more intelligent, more kind, more loving to yourself. Then all of a sudden, when you're at the ultimate level, the optimal level, you could also think of that as enlightenment. I'm going to talk a little bit about enlightenment in this episode. But right when, maybe a little bit before enlightenment, I would call this self-actualization. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're talking about self-actualization. And that's going to be when you detach from your ego and you start to witness your ego. So this is the difference, is you are no longer your ego. So I'm going to talk about this with society, but you are taught that you are your ego your whole life. So that's why we believe that we are our egos. So when we go beyond that belief, now we're in self-actualization, and now we're witnessing the ego. And we're watching the ego perform like a dance. So now you can start seeing how your ego is kind of like watching a theater, because you see that your ego is a character. There's nothing real, ultimately real about your ego. It's more like a character manipulating this physical realm. And so that's why it's theater. You could also think of it as fairy tale. I like to call the ego part of the fairy tale, just like society. Society is also the fairy tale. So this episode is basically all about fairy tales. So we're going beyond happiness, and now we're talking about society. But again, with happiness, you have to go beyond this duality of suffering on one side and happiness on the other. So how do we go beyond that? Again, that's going beyond your ego. So the nature of your ego is to suffer and have happiness, just like on this Friday afternoon, but also on a Monday morning. Now you're suffering. If you have a job that you don't like, for example, that you don't like very much, you're suffering. If you're hungry, you're suffering. If you're tired, you're suffering. Because this morning, I fell asleep at like 1:30 and then had to wake up at 6. And I had a sense of suffering up until I had lunch and I had some coffee. So now I'm starting to feel, my body's starting to feel more energized. And making these episodes also energizes me because it's my ultimate passion. It's my ultimate concern, as Paul Tillich says. Talking about philosophy, enlightenment, truth, this stuff gets me going. So one main thing about happiness is you develop yourself, and the main way to develop yourself is to find your ultimate concern, your ultimate passion. And that's what you can call life purpose, if you want to call it like that. So finding your ultimate life purpose is how you are internally motivated. So many people in society are externally motivated. They're externally motivated to go to work and make money and get a good GPA in school. Those are external. Those are just numbers. You're just getting numbers. You're getting numbers and materials that serve your ego. Now that is external motivation. You need a little bit of external motivation, but ultimately it doesn't serve your happiness, because when you get, for example, this is my Harley Davidson example. When you buy a Harley Davidson, you're very, very happy for 6 months. But then after the 6 months, you're like, okay, this is normal. Okay, like buying new materials or making more money, it becomes normal, or the word is normalization. And they talk about this in psychology a lot. So your environment or your life situation becomes normalized within 6 months, 4 to 8 months, you could say, in any situation. For example, I lived in Ecuador right after college. I studied Spanish at home for a month. Then I moved to Ecuador, and I lived there for a year and a half. Now, but when I was living there, the first 4 months or 6 months was kind of culture shock, right? You're just getting used to the culture for that first 4 or 6 months. And that's why I recommend, if you want to study abroad or live abroad, you have to go more than a year. Otherwise, you're not going to get the full experience. That's another video. But for now, think of it as when you get past the 4 months of culture shock, now it's normal. Now it's normal to be living in Ecuador, or it's normal to be studying abroad now. So that is the normalization process. And the reason why I'm talking about that is because it's about external motivation purely. So to be internally motivated or to have ultimate happiness, your happiness should not depend on life circumstances. You should be able to be happy whether or not you're hungry, whether or not you have to use the bathroom, whether or not you're in a good relationship or a bad relationship, whether or not you're single and lonely. All of this should not matter on your ultimate happiness, on your ultimate sense of like I am, or I am. Yes, it's I am, because when you say I am Kyle, for example, my name is Kyle. When you say I am Kyle, that is your ego. So some people are maybe skeptical, like, oh, I don't think egos exist. I'm like, well, what is your name? Well, my name is Steve. That's your ego. So that proves that point. So of course we all have egos because we identify ourselves with our names and our life stories. So the more you identify with that ego, the less you're going to be happy. Now, arriving with society, why does society not make you ultimately happy? Now again, I'm talking about happiness with a capital H now. With a capital H, that means happy in every single life circumstance, no matter what. Now that is going to be the ultimate level of your happiness, going beyond the small h happiness of this suffering and happiness duality. So you got to go beyond it. And the way to do that is seeing that part of happiness and suffering is the same thing, because they need each other. Suffering and happiness need each other. When you think about your physical life, your life as an ego, it's full of suffering and happy, ups and downs, ups and downs. I talked about this before. And so we have to go beyond that duality of suffering and happiness. And society, so why does society hold you back? It's like, no, come back, you're being too happy. That's hilarious, because society really, if you imagine like a bucket, and in the bucket there's a bunch of cockroaches, right? And that's kind of how society works, is it's a bucket of cockroaches. And if you want to be really happy, right, you're going to try to climb up the side of that bucket. As if you're a cockroach, you climb up the bucket and you try to escape the bucket, right? So you got to think of the bucket as society, with all of these cockroaches everywhere in the society, which are the people within the society. So the society is not just people; it is the bucket of expectations. Okay, busyness, stress, values, survival, ego, and the pressure to conform. Okay, so that's what I have in my notes about society. So we want to go one by one and show and demonstrate that society does not help us ultimately getting to that ultimate level of happiness. Because society, first of all, when you're born into your family, your parents, they teach you your ego, or they basically grow your ego for you. Now, the question is that bad or is that good? You're going to learn on this channel that there's nothing that's inherently bad or nothing that's inherently good. Okay, there's a phrase from William Shakespeare that goes, nothing is bad nor good, but thinking makes it so. Okay, so things are only good when you think it's good, and things are only bad when you think it's bad. Okay, so when you think of the ego, is it good or bad? It's completely neutral. Almost everything, when you're talking about truth and existence on the ultimate level, everything is just neutral. Okay, so talking about ego, what is its purpose, right? If it's neutral, okay, but what is its purpose? Okay, if you think about it, the ultimate purpose of ego is not to be happy. Your ego is not going to help you be happy. It's going to help you survive. That is why our egos are here to help us survive. And so that's why society is this bucket of the collective ego. It's basically a community, but it's basically everyone's ego so you add everyone's ego in like a mathematical equation, and then you say equals this collective ego, or this equation of egos coming together. And it's not just 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. Okay, it's going to be multiplied. So the collective ego is much stronger. So the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? You should know that phrase. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So that's basically what that's saying is it's not addition, it's multiplication. So the system has a mind of its own, you can say. And that's another key theme in this channel, is that free will has many, many, many different levels. So ultimately, there is no free will ultimately, there's only free will on the largest, most macro scale of reality. And you can call that being. And that's a whole nother episode. But when you go decrease in size from that ultimate reality, you're going to, for example, the universe, then you're going to galaxies, then you're going to solar systems, then you're going to the earth, okay, and then you're going to Homo sapiens, or humans in general. So it's going from levels of free will to smaller degrees of free will, or smaller, or I would call it less macro levels. And so really the free will is strongest at the societal level. It's actually strongest at the species level of humans, but it's also extremely strong at the societal level, especially if you live in a big country like the United States, or you live in Europe or China. The free will is at the society level, not at you. Ultimately, your ego tries to convince you that you have all of this free will, but that myth is decreasing our happiness. So we have to go beyond that idea that, I have so much free will. Just start to see that society has the free will, or society is the dictator. So free will is basically dictatorship, or it is the decider, the chooser. Okay, that is what free will is the ability to choose or organize or manipulate. So it is the ultimate who, it's the ultimate person. So societies as a whole is more like a person than you are a person. So if you look at human history has been created by humans, but at the whole species level, not by the cumulative individuals making little decisions. That is not ultimately how human history develops and envelops. It is basically that larger, more macro systems are at play. Okay, so in my previous episode on spiral dynamics, I'm going to talk a lot about spiral dynamics here on this episode, but you have to go back to stage yellow systems thinking in spiral dynamics. So stage yellow and stage turquoise. That's also called tier 2 thinking. So when you self-develop, you're getting higher and higher on these stages of spiral dynamics. You enter into stage yellow where you're a systems thinker. Okay, and systems thinking is seeing that the free will is not at the individual level, it is at the societal level. Okay, and the society is structured in a certain way for its own well-being, not the well-being of the individuals. That's a big point. Maybe I should rewind, or play back. Okay, so the idea is the free will is at the society level, the collective ego, or the identity the group identity so that it can exist, not for the well-being of the individuals in it. Extremely, extremely important. That is why society is not going to help you be happy. Okay, so think about school, think about work, and think about like holidays, family holidays, big family gatherings. What is the purpose of those? It is identity and it's preservation. It's preserving that identity. And that is the ultimate concern. When you think about a family reunion, it's all about the family ego, right? And the individuals, the people in it, are kind of like pawns, right? If you think about chess, they're the pawns, and the family is the chess player, right? So the chess player is manipulating all of these little people for its own benefit. And so that is like family reunions, school, universities, work, sports teams, countries. As the biggest one is patriotism. Patriotism is a huge barrier to your happiness. It's just, I don't even know where to start, because patriotism is a lot in stage blue and stage orange type happiness, which is tied to ego 100%, and not just ego, but it's tied to this group identity that's a complete group. Sorry, I'm talking fast because I'm excited. It's tied to this group identity. Your ego is tied to this group identity that is a myth. Okay, so group identities, all of them are ultimately myths. And that is why we're not happy. It's because we're putting all of our energy and all of our happiness, we're like selling it on the black market. Like, here's my happiness for $5. And we're selling our souls to this group identity that does not make us happy. So let's continue on how society structures itself so that you don't become ultimately happy, right? So we talked about ego. Now, so your society teaches you, or like presents you with your ego. And because it gives you your name, it gives you your life story. So that's what your ego is your name, which is tied to your life story. Your society convinces you of your life story, that it has, like it's real, for example, like your life story is actually real, when it's not ultimately. That's another episode. Your society tells you that you are a certain way. So your life story basically is just that you are a certain way. That's what history is. That's why identity and history, boom, they're the same thing. So identity politics, that comes from history. History teaches you your identity. So your that is what your ego is your identity, but not just your not just your name ego, your personal ego, but again, the group ego, the collective ego. Going back to the ego, whether it's good or bad, okay, again, it helps us survive. It's very, very key. So that's why the ego is neutral and not good nor bad. It is completely neutral, because survival is neutral. Surviving as a particular being, no, being is not the right word, as a particular ego. Yeah, I guess surviving as a particular ego has nothing to do with ultimate truth. There's nothing inherently good about surviving as yourself. There's nothing bad about surviving as yourself, right? Because if you imagine all of the energy that you are, so you can talk about your biological self. Think about all your biological self right now, your body. That could easily, that energy, that biological energy, that DNA, could be placed, or like could be recycled, or could be donated. That's kind of a funny word. You could donate your body to a new ego, and it would be completely neutral. There would be no reason why you, as an ego, I'll use examples, Kyle and Steve. So there's no reason why Kyle is more worthy of life than Steve, right? If it's the same cumulative energy, if it's the same set of energy, there's no reason why I should exist as a self instead of Steve. So Steve is like, if you imagine Steve as like this potential ego, maybe he's the one that didn't get born, right? For example, when I was born, maybe there was two choices, maybe God or the chooser of human birth or karma or reincarnation, right? So if you think about like reincarnation, right before you're chosen to be born, I'm not saying reincarnation is true. I'm just saying, using reincarnation as an example, as like in philosophy, these are called mental situations. I'm trying to think of the right word, but just think of it as a situation. So Kyle was born instead of Steve. Now, Steve could have easily been born with the material that I am living with, the biological material that I'm living with, and also all of the privileges that come with being Kyle, such as having this apartment, having friends, and having a family. That could have easily been Steve. And there's no reason why one is better than the other, Kyle or Steve. It just happens that my soul or consciousness is Kyle. That's just completely random. So again, that's why egos are completely neutral. They just help you survive. And how do they do that? Is your society teaches you the myth of, society teaches you the myth. Now our myth in American society and European society helps us survive, because we say that the myth is the physical world, right? First, at stage blue, we were convinced that Christianity, Catholicism, and Islam were true, right? And then we kind of moved up to stage orange, and we started seeing like, no, there's some limitations to believing only in Islam and only in Christianity, like using the Bible or the Quran to determine how the physical world works. So that is ultimately not going to help us. That's why we moved from stage blue to stage orange. So again, that's traditional society to modern society. Stage orange is capitalism and science. So science and capitalism now are our myths. And not saying myths are good or bad. Again, myths are neutral. It's just that they're not ultimately true. The nature of a myth is that it's not ultimately true. It may have facts embedded in the myth, but facts are also not inherently true, not objectively true. They are just community agreements. A fact is just an agreement between sentient beings, or basically just people. That was way too in detail. Just ignore the idea of sentient beings. Just think of that. A fact is when two or more people agree on something. So it becomes a fact. So it becomes like a working reality. But it's not ultimate reality. Okay, so that's a whole nother topic, is what is ultimate reality. That's a whole nother topic, because we're looking at how society is structured and why. That has nothing to do with ultimate reality that like the universe is happening in. Okay, so again, when you're growing up in stage blue society, stage orange society, and most societies are that right now, stage blue and stage orange societies, and that we're being taught the values of those stages. So again, like stage red, for example, you're being taught that you ought to be the strong man. You have to stick to your guns. You have to survive in this anarchy of this anarchy world, this anarchical world, this chaotic world, and you have to survive within that. But then you move up to stage blue, and stage blue is like, well, the universe is ordered, okay, and it was ordered by this masculine manly God, and he ordered it for the benefit of our group, for the benefit of like my identity group, not for the benefit of all humans. That's not what like the Quran and the Bible are talking about. Benefit for Christians and benefit for Muslims. And that the universe is structured for the benefit of that small group of people, or not small group, that's not a small group of people, but a certain group of people within the entire species of humans. So you learn the values, and then you learn stage orange values, right? Such as success. Then you're taught about hard work. You're taught about status. You're taught about secularism, capitalism, science, materialism, okay? 2 types of materialism. I wanted to make a video about this a while back, about the 2 types of materialism. The first type of materialism is capitalism. So it's putting your happiness in materials. So that's exactly what I meant by the Harley Davidson example, that is materialism when you are putting your identity inside of what you have, or what you have becomes what you are. So these 2 things, have and be, become the same verb to describe yourself. So, I am a doctor. I am a biology major. I am middle class. I am a scientist. So these are all based on status. And that's what Stage Orange is all about, is improving your status so that you can have more prestige. And basically it's about sex appeal. That is ultimately what Stage Orange is about, is you become happy when you feel attractive, right? So you do all of these things because you want to appear to be sexy at Stage Orange. That's ultimately what it's about. You post on Instagram your muscles. You post on Instagram your yoga poses and your kind of in your clothes that are tight fit and maybe a bra. You post on Instagram your best photos, not your average photos, right? You post your best photos because you want to appear sexy. You study a lot so that you can become a doctor, so that you can become high status, so that you can become sexy. And that is not a logical or rational choice that you made in your conscious mind. It is ultimately your subconscious body that is doing that decision making for you. That's exactly why you don't have a lot of free will. It's because your subconscious mind, your subconscious body is telling you what to do and what to be and what to have, because that's what's considered sexy in this society. So Stage Orange is all about the collective ego, because it's society that chooses what is sexy, and then the individual wants to be that. Okay, so one big idea about Instagram is that Instagram is creating these levels of sexiness and beauty. So, for example, when I was a kid and I would look at these nature videos and see photos of nature, I would say, "Wow, that's so beautiful." But it was just like a photo of like one mountain, and the photo was not photoshopped, right? It was just like, it was still beautiful. I grew up in Minnesota where there aren't mountains, so I would see photos of mountains. I'm like, "Wow, so beautiful." And then now with Instagram, there's all of this Photoshop, and people have the money to go anywhere in the world. They're going to the most beautiful places in the world. Not just beautiful places, they're going to the most beautiful places, taking photos with their 4K cameras from I forget the word, from drones. That's the word. They're taking photos from drones of these beautiful mountains from above, and they Photoshop them to make them look extremely colorful. And now that's what's considered beautiful, right? So it's upping the ante. It's basically creating this bubble where the bubble is getting bigger and bigger. It's increasing the standard of beauty, right? And that's what's happening with women and men too, is women are constantly being influenced to be more and more beautiful. So even though the idea of beauty, I think, is just changing, but how we perceive it is that, no, I need to be more and more beautiful. women are just getting more and more beautiful. That's not ultimately true. It's just that the culture is changing. It's not becoming more, women are not becoming more beautiful. It's just that our value, our perception of beauty is changing a little bit. Ultimately, the thing about beauty is it's cross-cultural. It's universal. A lot of beauty is universal, probably a majority of it. But in the United States, what's considered sexy from year to year can change quite a bit, but only like 10 to 20% of sexiness changes. 80% of it is more like universal sex appeal. That's kind of a side topic, but it's really extremely relevant with Stage Orange. And that's what our society mostly is. The main influence in our society is Stage Orange. And so Stage Orange gives you these values of success, working hard, status, and it's also moralization. What moralization is whenever people use the word should or ought, that is moralization. So people should do this. People should not do that. That is moralization. And so moralization is what you are taught from your society. Huge. That is the ultimate. Those are the values. Moralization and values are extremely similar, but ultimately you're learning about the morals of the society. So not just the norms, but also the morals. What you should do and what you shouldn't do. Right. So for example, I don't like it when I don't get enough sleep. It just annoys me so much because I've studied the psychology of not getting enough sleep, and there's a lot of health defactors from not sleeping enough. So you need, for example, I know I need about 8.5 or 9 hours every night to feel healthy. It's basically about health. I don't feel healthy when I get 6 hours of sleep 2 nights in a row, which is it happens frequently. Now that I'm a graduate student, I'm getting less sleep during the week than my body requires. That's just unhealthy. And it's such a pet peeve of mine because growing up in a Stage Orange society mostly, the pressure in Stage Orange is to be productive, produce, right? And sometimes people in college, they brag to each other how little sleep they got. It is the funniest thing. I got 4 hours of sleep last night and I'm doing pretty good. I just need so much coffee. And it's not like they're bragging, they're like complaining, but they're bragging, they're complaining, but they're bragging. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I only got 4 hours of sleep. I just had to drink 2 cups of coffee before my final, right? Like, it's so annoying because it should be just like, well, I'm not going to use the word should. I'm going to discuss how when you move up the spiral dynamics level, you see how superfluous that is, how that should be an obsolete value, is not getting enough sleep, because it's just unhealthy. And so that the idea of when you're living life in an unhealthy way, that means you're lower on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or the lower end of spiral dynamics, kind of at this, again, stage blue, stage orange level, where you're still worrying highly about your survival, your thriving, your ego. It's 100% based on ego, comfort, safety. And so stage orange is a lot in safety. Even though in America we talk about freedom, the style of freedom that Americans are talking about are security and safety, not about freedom. It's about protection of my ego, protection of what's mine. It's about building walls. Literally, that's what Trump wants to do, right? A lot of Republicans who support Trump, they talk about freedom, but really they want to build a wall. I mean, what does that have to do with freedom? Freedom is opening up, not closing down. Anyways, so obviously when you're growing up in this stage orange society, it leads to busyness. So busyness and not getting enough sleep are extremely related. So that leads to a lot of consumption of caffeine, and too much caffeine is really, it decreases from your mindfulness and your conscious state, and it's extremely distracting. Drinking too much coffee is extremely distracting. Also, being really, really busy during the week, like right now it's a Friday afternoon, there's the desire to drink alcohol and too much alcohol. And of course, there's nothing wrong inherently about beer and wine. It's just that it's extremely distracting from going deeper into your, again, happiness, going beyond your ego, developing yourself to detach from the self, living beyond yourself. These types of ideas, which are ultimately going to be stage turquoise, stage turquoise values. And that's why I'm really pushing myself towards stage turquoise. And so this is kind of a side note, but I'm pushing myself to stage turquoise. But people who are, mostly in stage orange, a little bit in stage green, a little bit in stage blue, they find that weird, right? When you're so much more like psychologically and spiritually developed than the majority of society. The majority, it's all about being normal, right? It's the pressure to conform. That's one of the things I have in my notes is society is the pressure to conform. But the pressure is to be normal. The pressure is just to survive and not be happy, right? So if you want to be happy, you got to develop yourself psychologically and spiritually and mentally. But the conundrum is that you're going to be viewed as weird. You're going to be viewed as outside of the paradigm. So the word is paradigm. So when you're outside of that paradigm of busyness, stress, expectations to do. So in stage orange, it's all about doing. Also in stage green, it's a lot about doing as well. But it's not about being and just existing, right? Stage turquoise is finally when you can relax, like breathe, finally, because ultimately it's about being and existing just with a smile on your face and observing the world, being like, this world is just so beautiful. And my nature is just beauty. You can see me smiling because I've done a lot of like infinite love type meditating, like Kriya yoga, Zen meditation, kind of heart-centered. I often put my awareness at my heart. I put my awareness at the top of my head, which makes your consciousness like feel like it's about to explode out to the rest of the universe. These are all subjective experiences that science is yet to explain. Science is yet to explain. And the question is, will science ever be able to explain subjective experience? Not how it's structured right now. How science is structured right now is stuck in stage orange, where it's about a physical world, right? Like how do I make another pen? How can I make a better pen? Do I make a pen with better ink? Do I have it? And how can I sell it at a cheap price? So that's stage orange is scientific technology and selling it in the marketplace at capitalism. So that is the stage orange two-headed animal. The two-headed dog is science and capitalism, and that is secularization. But going beyond that, going into stage green, you can start being a little bit more. It's still all about doing. Stage yellow is still all about studying and philosophizing, and it's about analyzing data. It's about doing surveys. It's about studying history. It's about traveling the world to communicate with experts. It's still a lot of doing. But at least with stage yellow and stage green, you're opening yourself up to the possibility of stage turquoise. So that's, again, this is getting, into spiral dynamics. So to get the details, you need to go and watch the previous episode. But there's no separation. So one of the philosophies of this channel, the more you watch my podcasts, is you have to view that knowledge is a web. all ideas are connected, right? It's exactly like gravity. Actually, knowledge works exactly like gravity. Every single particle is attracted to another particle, but it's like this infinite web of idea A, idea B, idea C, D, infinite number of pieces of data or information or values or ideas that are all connected to each other, and there's no separation between them at all. Knowledge just is. The reason why it's categorized is for society, the collective ego, so that we can oversimplify reality. That's what society does. It oversimplifies reality, and therefore it's now a myth and no longer reality. That is why society builds myths. That is why you have an ego, because you are categorized as yourself and not yourself. That's the double negative, right? Not yourself. So the outside of yourself, right? We're taught that there is me and then there's outside of me, and outside of me is not me. That's what we're taught by our society. And if you say like, well, I don't do philosophy. Well, what that means is now if you don't do philosophy, there necessarily you believe in the paradigm because you haven't thought about it. So the paradigm is the influential value system right now today. And that is that's the paradigm. And so when you're not a free thinker, that's what you believe. That is the standard. That is the paradigm. That is what's normal. So you believe in what's normal in the time being before you become a free thinker. Now, finally, you become a free thinker and you take truth seriously instead of taking truth for granted. When you take truth for granted, you're taught the myth. But when you're serious and you want to develop into stage yellow and stage turquoise, and even you have to enter into stage green. A lot of people in society their value systems are in stage blue and stage orange. And stage blue and stage orange are so dangerous. They're some of the most dangerous stages because it leads to so much war. It leads to so much environmental degradation. Degrading means making something worse. And not treating animals well, because when you're in stage blue and stage orange, you view animals as something that is supposed to be useful for humans. How can I use it for myself? So it's all egotistical. Whereas finally at stage green, you start seeing that animals are part of this ecosystem that I'm a part of. So I have to think about the welfare of the ecosystem too, not just myself. So then you're opening yourself up. But again, stage green is a little bit naive of how ecosystems work, because they still believe that the free will lies in the individual. That is why that is part of why stage green ultimately fails, or ultimately is naive and myopic. So you have to keep developing into stage yellow so that you start seeing that, oh wow, the ecosystem, I understand how it works. I understand that it's not all about me. It's about the complete welfare of the ecosystem. And it's not about blaming. You can't blame the parts. You can't blame individual parts within the system for the system of going haywire or awry. You have to analyze what is the system. That is systems thinking. If there's a problem with the different parts, you have to see, well, how are the parts connected and interlinked? And they're interlinked by the system. They're not interlinked in a vacuum. They're not interlinked individually, like just A, B, and C. That's not how it works. It's that A, B, and C exist because D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, because those are all connected. So in order to understand the welfare of A, me, you have to know about A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. You have to know about all of those and how they are connected. What happens if O doesn't do its job? Then P doesn't work, and then Q dies, and then you don't even have T, right? But to have the entire alphabet, you need to have all of them. You have to have all of them functioning. So what is that? I mean, to learn more about how ecosystems work, I would just study ecology. With ecology, you see how all of these species are interconnected. Extremely, extremely important. At this point, 50 minutes in, I would ask, do you have any questions, right? In the future, I would love to be more interactive with my audience. At this point on YouTube, it's all about commenting below. In the future, I would love to be on Skype, interacting with people. I want to get in debates, healthy debates about some of these ideas. Because a lot of people I see would disagree with a lot of things I say, because my views are largely outside of the societal paradigm, the societal norm. So that's why I can see a lot of people challenging my views. But I've thought about my views a lot, and it's not a belief system. So this is kind of part of another video. But the reason why my belief system is different than the paradigm, than like a majority of people's belief systems, is because I've studied philosophy. So I've studied what beliefs are, and that's called metacognition, or metaphysics, or epistemology. These types of words help you, when you study these things, you can start to analyze your belief system in and of itself, not just the beliefs inside of the pool. So if you imagine human beliefs in a pool, right? People's beliefs are in the water, but I'm looking at the pool in general and trying to go beyond the pool. Or like I see that human knowledge and beliefs are limited, that they can only exist in the pool, right? But I'm saying, but truth is everything. Truth has to be everything. Otherwise, it's a small t truth. Otherwise, it's finite. So then I'm saying, how can I go beyond my mind? How can I go beyond my limited brain and see that see the ultimate truth, the truth of everything? And ultimately, you got to see that you can't believe in your beliefs. Whatever belief, no matter what belief you have, you can't believe in it 100%. All beliefs, if you try to believe in it 100%, is to serve your ego. So beliefs ultimately serve your ego, and it's all about the myth. It's all about. So that's why myth helps you survive. For example, the myth that everything is just physical. Everything. The myth that Sir Isaac Newton described the entire universe. That's a complete myth. Now we're looking at the complexity of the universe with quantum mechanics. So instead of going from classical physics, now we're opening ourselves up in like stage green, stage yellow, stage turquoise to this idea of quantum mechanics, where we're seeing like, well, what is an atom? It's not physical. It's hilarious. So people who say that the universe is ultimately physical, why do they believe that? Because they say everything is the building block is the atom. But the atom is not physical. The atom is full of it's not even empty space, because empty space is full of atoms, right? There's not even gravity inside of an atom. We have no idea it's magic. What's happening inside of an atom is just complete magic. And if that is the building block of everything, then everything's magic. Also, like physics tells us that the atoms are 4% of the universe. The other 96% is dark matter and dark energy that we've never seen. Only math has been trying to predict it, but we haven't seen it, right? So that's just a belief that's not based on truth yet. So again, these are going beyond the belief systems. And this is how, again, you develop yourself to detach from yourself. Ultimately, happiness is found by not believing anything. That is the ultimate sign of happiness. And happiness is actually the byproduct. Happiness is not the goal. Happiness is not the goal. There should be no goal. There should only just be truth and reality right here. Okay? So these ideas might seem weird because these are stage turquoise type of seeing. But you have to see that going beyond the physical world, going beyond all beliefs, is the purpose. That is the purpose of existence. That is the ultimate purpose of the life of the truth seeker, is going beyond beliefs. Again, going beyond the pool of beliefs. Do you want to keep swimming in that pool of beliefs that's full of stress, busyness, war, and I guess just dystopia and non-happiness? No matter what part of the spiral dynamics you're at, you're doing, and you're swimming in that pool until you arrive at this stage turquoise, going beyond the ego and seeing that, or you start to have the value that my nature is no other than the universe itself. Sorry, that was kind of big language. Basically, I am the universe. The universe is I. That is going to be the faith. That's actually a leap of faith. That's not a belief. It's a leap of faith because you are going beyond the ego, which is full of the beliefs. The ego is the one with the beliefs. You're jumping beyond it into nothingness, right? And the faith is that when you jump into nothingness, you'll be jumping into existence too, as well. And that is the leap of faith. Soren Kierkegaard talks about the leap of faith. The ultimate leap of faith is jumping into nothingness and having the faith that nothingness is the same as existence, is the same as everything, that there's no separation, that they are the same, nothingness and everything. So again, it's about existing, it's about being and not doing. It's about going beyond the busyness. It's about going beyond what societal pressures, going beyond the pressure to conform. It's being a free thinker. It's being a skeptic. It's not taking knowledge for granted and not just believing verbatim what society is saying. You have to trust that the universe is your subjective experience. Your subjective experience is the tool. It's the ultimate scientific method. The ultimate scientific method is yourself. And that goes from, and one of the main ways to do that is being. And meditation can help you, but that's not ultimately what being is. Meditating is doing. Being. And how does that look? I can't tell you. I can only be myself. That's how I demonstrate it to you, is by being myself. And that's what being is. Being is only this reality. Being is only now. It's not concepts. The past, that's a concept. The future, that's a concept. The other people, like society, it's a concept. This is all now. This is all here now. Subjective experience. Society happens in subjective experience. Okay? So this is going to be a little bit of a preview to another episode. But this episode is about society does not make you happy. If you like this episode, like it down below. If you have questions or want to debate or you want to be happier, comment below. And to finish, it's all about being. Being, and the nature of being is peace. Peace. Happy Friday.